In the previous episode in our series on the world of Ice and Fire, we depicted the events that led to Robert's rebellion, as we described how the king, Aerys II Targaryen, ruled and became mad, as did many members of his house before him. Although the rebellion started out with a Targaryen advantage, and Robert lost the Battle of Ashford and now was on the back foot, things were hardly ideal for the ruling dynasty. Welcome to our second video in this series, in which we will talk about the Battle of Trident and the conclusion of Robert's rebellion. There are some things about the Game of Thrones universe that we can't say, since George R.R. Martin still hasn't finished writing it, but maybe he would have if he used the creative writing software from our sponsor, Campfire. Used by over 150,000 writers, Campfire is a way to plan, tell, and publish stories. It's divided into 3 sections: Write, Learn, and Explore. Campfire Write is the main tool for organizing creative works, letting you combine character sheets, relationship webs, timelines, arcs, languages, magic systems, and catalogs of lore all together alongside a manuscript editor, keeping all the world building together as you write and chronicling your world for reference. Then Campfire Learn provides resources to help you improve at writing, and Campfire Explore lets you publish to a community and read what other users have been creating, although normally everything you write is private unless you say otherwise. It's free to use for small projects, and for larger ones you can either buy the software outright or get a cheap subscription from 25 cents a month. You pay only for the modules of the software you actually intend to use. Write better stories faster with Campfire. Organize your story today at campfirewriting.com. In the aftermath of the Battle of Ashford, fought in 282 AC, the new hand of the king, Aerys, and a competent commander, Jon Connington, amassed an immense host and gave chase to the weary soldiers of Robert Baratheon's now depleted army. The situation turned desperate as the forced march progressed, with Robert being injured and left without an army, eventually taking refuge in the Stony Sept. Seeing an opportunity for glory and a chance to end the rebellion in one fell swoop, Connington occupied the town and ordered all of his soldiers to begin searching for the renegade, even within the sewers of the settlement. Jon attempted to entice the people of the town with offers of pardons and reward if they would give up the Lord of Storm's End, and when this failed, placed disobedient civilians in crows' cages to make an example of them. This failed miserably, as various townsfolk kept Robert hidden as he recuperated from his wounds. The Royalists had failed in their task by the time the forces of Eddard Stark and Hoster Tully reached the Stony Sept. Left with no other alternative, Jon Connington amassed his forces. The septons of the town rang bronze and silver bells to warn the townsfolk to stay indoors, earning the engagement the name of the Battle of the Bells. The rebels quickly stormed the meagre fortifications of the town, and bloody street-by-street combat ensued, with casualties mounting on both sides. Connington's force fought with immense ferocity, defending each alleyway, rooftop, and street with their lives. Jon would wound Lord Hoster and slay the heir to the Eyrie, Sir Denys Arryn, with an axe in the brutal fighting. As the streets ran red with rivers of blood and the battle hung upon a knife's edge, the Lord of Storm's End emerged, brandishing once more his mighty warhammer. Robert immediately slew 6 men, among them Rhaegar's close friend and former squire Sir Miles Mooton, before almost killing Jon Connington on the steps of the town's sept. However, before he could do so, Jon ordered a general retreat, seeing that the day had been lost, barely escaping with his life and a battered host of disillusioned warriors. Robert refused to take the glory, however, instead insisting it was Eddard who had won the day and saved his life. The Battle of the Bells finally forced Aerys to take the threat posed by Robert's rebellion seriously. Seeing now that his kingdom and very life were at risk in the conflict, more so even than in the prior Blackfire rebellions. Responding as always with misplaced rage and paranoia, he stripped Jon Connington of all of his titles and sent him into exile, where it is believed he drank himself to death. Sir Jonathan Darry and Sir Barristan Selmy were sent in the Hand's place to try and rally what remained of the royalist force. Meanwhile, Rhaegar, who was in the Tower of Joy, keeping Lyanna Stark by his side, was asked to return to the capital by the head of the Kingsguard, Sir Gerald Hightower. acting on the command of the king. The prince immediately urged his father to seek out the aid of Tywin Lannister, which the Mad King refused, instead trusting the war effort to lesser men such as his new hand Carlton Chelstead, who could not stand before the combined might of the rebel host. Aerys also ordered his chief alchemist to begin setting up caches of wildfire around King's Landing in the event the city should fall. Meanwhile, the victorious rebel forces returned to Riverrun, where Jon Arryn, who now needed a new heir, married Lisa Tully, and in a joint ceremony, Eddard Stark and Catelyn Tully were also married, further solidifying the alliance. While the rebels now had the initiative, the return of Rhaegar to the fold, who was an immensely competent warrior and commander, ensured that the war was not over. In response to this news, Robert Baratheon officially announced his claim to the Iron Throne, and his army began the march south to meet the royalist forces. Displaying more of his callous nature, Aerys blackmailed Lord Doran Martell into supporting the war effort by reminding him that his daughter, Elia, remained in his power. As a result, 10,000 Dornish men were sent to join the royalist army, with Aerys sending Prince Lewin Martell of the Kingsguard to assume control of this contingent. Word was also eventually sent to Tywin Lannister to join the war effort. However, his mobilization was purposely delayed in order to assuage which way the winds were blowing. In total, the royalist army amounted to 40,000 soldiers, including the Dornish 10,000, the soldiers of the Crown, and a number of men sent by Mace Tyrell as he continued the siege of Storm's End. The fact that Stannis Baratheon was still holding out against Tyrell meant that thousands of royalist soldiers were tied up. Still, the Targaryens possessed an advantage in numbers, and also a competent commander, leaving the outcome of the battle uncertain for the rebels, despite the fact they had a far more battle-hardened army. The Battle of the Trident took place in 283 AC, and was fought on the aforementioned river at a crossing point which came to be known as the Ruby Ford. Seeing the rebel forces amassed across the Trident, Rhaegar decided to take the initiative and force a crossing. In response, Robert's booming voice bellowed out orders to hold the line. The Dornish men under Lewin Martell began the assault, threatening Robert's left flank with an early foray. Lord Corbray was injured in this fighting, forcing his son, Lyn Corbray, to assume control of the left, barely holding back the Dornish onslaught. Seeing that the pressure was untenable, Lyn Corbray charged forward, leading his men by example and utterly breaking the Dornish force, slaying their commander, Lewin Martell, in single combat. Elsewhere, the peerless Sir Barristan Selmy fought like a man possessed, slaying numerous rebel soldiers, cutting a bloody swath through their lines, while Sir Jason Mallister killed 3 of Rhaegar's bannermen in the melee. Many lords and knights of renown lost their lives at the Trident. However, the outcome of the battle was soon to be decided, with Robert Baratheon and Rhaegar Targaryen meeting in the center of the battle on horseback in a fight which would determine the fate of the 7 kingdoms for generations to come. Rhaegar, a peerless swordsman of immense skill, provided Robert's greatest challenge to date. He rained down blow after blow with his blade, which the battle-hardened and immensely powerful Robert merely shrugged off. The duel went on for hours, as the chaotic and desperate fighting continued in the background. Yet Robert's recent experience fighting on the front lines eventually proved to be decisive. With a blow of such tremendous power it broke the rubies off of Rhaegar's breastplate, Robert smote his adversary with his warhammer, ending the life of the last true hope of the royalist faction, and effectively the war. This brought the battle to an end, as the leaderless and demoralized army broke and fled the field, making their way back to King's Landing. A half-dead Barristan Selmy was brought before Robert, who, appreciating a true warrior, pardoned the man and had his own maester treat his wounds. In the immediate aftermath of the battle, Walder Frey arrived with his forces, unwilling to commit to the cause until he knew that he would be on the victorious side, leading to the nickname the late Walder Frey being forever hoisted upon him. Aerys, hearing of his son's death, sent his pregnant wife Rhaela to Dragonstone with his young son Viserys, simultaneously making plans for the destruction of the city by way of wildfire. Robert, now seeking to claim his throne, had however been wounded by Rhaegar in the battle and sent the majority of his force along with Eddard Stark to claim the city from the Mad King. Initially, the Iron Islands had remained neutral in the conflict. However, upon hearing of the death of Rhaegar Targaryen, Lord Quellan Greyjoy decided to take the rebel side. Still unsure as to Lannister loyalties, he sent a fleet of a meager 50 longships to attack the Reach, with the rest remaining at the Iron Islands. This force began raiding, devastating several settlements, but before they could continue, however, they were unexpectedly set upon by the longships of the Shield Islands, who were the vassals of the Tyrells, in what would become known as the Battle of the Mander. While on paper this was a victory for the Greyjoys, their liege lord Quellan Greyjoy was slain in the fighting, and the remaining fleet returned to the Iron Islands, having achieved little and lost much. Meanwhile, Aerys's wildfire plot had been progressing at a frantic pace. When the Hand, Carlton Chelstead, learned of the plan, he attempted to dissuade his king, but the latter was fully in the grips of his insanity, and instead had him burned alive, naming his pyromancer Rossart as the new Hand. A fortnight after the Trident, the forces of Tywin Lannister appeared outside the walls of King's Landing. It wasn't clear what their intentions were, but at the urging of Grand Maester Pycelle, Aerys let his force of 12,000 men within the city gates. The Lannister forces then began a brutal sack of the city, murdering, raping and looting to the dismay of the king, who had believed his old Hand had come to rescue him from this desperate situation. A hand-picked group of Lannister soldiers, led by Gregor Clegane and Sir Amory Lorch, began to scale the walls of the Red Keep. Sir Jaime Lannister, who was in command of the keep, asked permission to go out and make terms with his father, which Aerys outrightly refused, ordering the young knight to kill his father. The Mad King then met with his chief pyromancer. Seeing Rossart leaving the meeting, Jaime realized that he intended to burn the entire city with wildfire, and followed the older man, killing him before he could wreak such havoc upon the city. Jaime returned to the king, informing him of his actions. Aerys fled to the throne, but Jaime knew that the king could send another messenger to initiate the wildfire plot. Seeing no other option, Jaime hauled the king off his throne and slit his throat, just as Sir Ellis Westerling and Lord Roland Crakehall entered the throne room. The young Lannister forever earned the moniker of Kingslayer. Meanwhile, as the Lannisters fought and slaughtered the last of the Loyalist forces, Eddard Stark and his men arrived from the Trident, and, making his way to the throne room, the Warden of the North stared at Jaime coldly until he got off the Iron Throne, proclaiming the kingship of Robert Baratheon. To prove their loyalty to Robert, the Lannister assault force had simultaneously entered the nursery where Sir Amory murdered Rhaenys Targaryen and Gregor murdered Aegon Targaryen before raping and murdering his mother Elia Martell. Upon arriving to the city, Robert and Eddard argued over these murders, with the ever-honourable Eddard believing them to be cruel and unnecessary acts, whereas his liege held them to be justified. Jon Arryn was unable to cool the tensions between the two men, so Eddard rode south, relieving the siege of Storm's End after almost a year. The defenders had only survived due to the actions of Davos Seaworth, a smuggler who had brought provisions of onions and salted fish through the blockade, saving the men from starvation. The Tyrells surrendered, and the majority of the Lords of the Reach were pardoned, with Stannis being given orders to launch an assault on Dragonstone, which was easily taken. However, Stannis was unable to capture the children of Rhaella, who had died in childbirth. Viserys and Daenerys escaped to Essos with the aid of Sir Willem Darry, making it to the Free Cities where they would live in exile. Eddard then rode further south with 6 companions: Roland Reed, Lord William Dustin, Ethan Glover, Martin Castle, Theo Wull, and Sir Mark Riswell to free his sister Lyanna from her captivity in the Tower of Joy. The tower was protected by 3 knights of Aerys's Kingsguard: Sir Arthur Dane, Sir Oswell Went, and the Lord Commander, Sir Gerald Hightower. with only Eddard and Howland surviving the ensuing conflict. Rushing into the tower after this, Eddard found his dying sister, and she extracted a promise before passing away. The tower was then leveled by Eddard, the stones used to create cairns for the fallen of that day. Eddard would then travel even further south to Starfall, leaving Lady Ashara Dane with her brother's blade, the Sword of the Morning, before returning to King's Landing for Robert's coronation. Robert duly took up his place upon the Iron Throne, and named his foster father Jon Arryn as his hand, and his brother Stannis as the Lord of Dragonstone. At the urging of Jon Arryn, he then married Tywin's daughter Cersei in a move aimed to stabilize the kingdom for years to come, and ensure Lannister support should Viserys attempt to reclaim his throne. These fears were sparked by the Dornish attempts to support Viserys. However, the Hand of the King was able to assuage their concerns, returning the bones of Lewyn Martell, which were duly buried, and facing the questioning of the Martells in relation to the circumstances of Ellia's death. While this was successful short-term, Lord of Dorne, Doran Martell, continued to plot a Targaryen restoration in secret for many years to come, never forgetting the actions of the Lannisters or forgiving them. This brings us to the events detailed within A Game of Thrones. However, this is the story for our next documentary on the history of Westeros. We're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.